At the mansion, the millionaire's daughter fainted, until the black nanny screamed, "The juice is poisoned." Keisha's scream echoed through the marble hallways of the Whitmore mansion like a gunshot. "The juice is poisoned. Don't let her drink it." Her desperate voice cut through the elegant silence of Sunday afternoon, causing everyone to turn to her with a mixture of shock and indignation. Dressed in his simple nanny uniform, Keisha rushed toward Isabella, the 16-year-old daughter of Richard Whitmore, CEO of the country's largest construction company. The blonde teenager was already bringing the glass of orange juice to her lips when Keisha slapped her hand away, causing the liquid to spill onto the Italian leather sofa that cost more than a popular car. "How dare you?" Patricia Whitmore yelled, rising from her armchair in a rage. "Have you completely lost your mind? You hit my daughter." Richard Whitmore put down his financial newspaper and walked toward Keisha with an expression that mixed contempt and authority. "Keisha, you have 10 seconds to explain this madness before I call security." At 32, Keisha Johnson had worked as a nanny for wealthy families for over a decade, but she had never faced a situation like this. "Mr. Whitmore, please just look at the juice. It smells strange, and the color is different." Isabella, still confused by the situation, held the arm where she had been touched. "Daddy, she hurt me. And she ruined his dress." "Call the police," Patricia ordered, already dialing on her phone. "This woman is clearly not mentally well. Assaulting a minor, destroying our property." But Keisha remained firm, his eyes fixed on the broken glass on the floor. The liquid had small crystals at the bottom and a slightly bitter odor that she recognized from when she had cared for a child with accidental poisoning years ago. "Sir, please just test the juice. Something is wrong." Richard hesitated for a second. Something in Keisha's tone of urgency, in the way she had risked her job and her safety to stop Isabella from drinking, made him pause. "Patricia, wait a moment." He crouched down and examined the spilled liquid, bringing his nose closer. Her expression changed immediately. "Where did you get this juice, Isabella?" "Grandma Helena made it especially for me," the little girl replied, still resentful. "She said it was a special family recipe, with vitamins." Keisha's eyes widened. Helena Whitmore, the 80-year-old matriarch who lived in the house, had always treated the nanny coldly, but making special juice was unheard of. Especially considering that, in the last week, Keisha had witnessed whispered conversations between Helena and the family lawyer about necessary changes to the will and problems with the rebellious heiress. Richard Whitmore asked no one to touch the liquid and called the family's private toxicologist. Within 20 minutes, confirmation arrived. The juice contained a potentially lethal dose of digitalis, extracted from plants growing in the mansion's own garden. While the family processed the shock, Keisha remained silent in the corner of the room, observing their reactions. Patricia cried, hugging her daughter. Richard made frantic phone calls, and Helena had quietly disappeared to her room on the second floor. "How did you know?" asked Isabella, finally approaching the nanny who had saved her life. Keisha smiled sadly. "Sometimes, when you're invisible to people, you see and hear things they think go unnoticed." At that moment, as she looked around the mansion where she had been treated like furniture for 2 years, Keisha realized that his real battle was just beginning. Because if there was someone willing to poison his own granddaughter, how many other dark secrets did those marble walls hide? If you're enjoying this story of courage and mystery, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, because what Keisha discovered about this millionaire family will shock you in ways you could never imagine. Over the next 48 hours, Keisha's life was turned upside down in ways even she could not have predicted. Helena Whitmore, the poisonous matriarch who had almost murdered her own granddaughter, managed to convince half the family that Keisha was an unstable employee seeking attention. "Think about it, Richard," Helena whispered to his son over breakfast, her voice trembling with the perfectly rehearsed frailty of an elderly woman. "A nanny who's only been working for 2 years screaming that I tried to poison my own granddaughter? It's obvious that she's trying to blackmail our family." Patricia, already predisposed to hate any employee who dared to contradict her, embraced the narrative as a personal crusade. "I always said there was something strange about that woman. Too observant, too quiet. Those people always hold grudges." Richard, torn between gratitude for Keisha saving Isabella and family pressure, made a decision that would change everything. He hired a private investigator to check the nanny's complete background. Keisha found out about the investigation when Mr. Henderson, the retired neighbor who always greeted her during her morning walks with Isabella, casually mentioned that men in suits had visited her old neighborhood asking questions about her. They asked about your finances, his relationships, whether he had a history of lying or erratic behavior, Henderson said, clearly uncomfortable. I told them that you're one of the most honest people I've ever met, but, Keisha, what's going on? At that moment, sitting on the park bench where she always took Isabella to play, Keisha felt a familiar rage rising in his chest. It was the same feeling she had experienced at 16, when she was unfairly expelled from the private school where she studied on a full scholarship, accused of stealing a watch from a wealthy classmate. The watch was later found in the accuser's own backpack. It was the same anger she had felt at 22, when she lost her job at a medical clinic after the doctor's jealous wife spread unfounded rumors about an alleged extramarital affair. They always do this, she muttered to herself, watching children play in the playground while her nannies chatted. When they can't attack your actions, they attack her character. But this time would be different. Because this time, Keisha had something she didn't have in previous situations: inside information about the real criminals. During her 2 years at the Whitmore mansion, being treated like decorative furniture, she had observed and memorized much more than anyone could imagine. Phone conversations, documents left open, family meetings where her presence was completely ignored. Like the heated discussion between Helena and the family accountant about offshore accounts that need to be regularized before the tax audit. Or the tense call between Patricia and someone named Dr. Morrison about test results that cannot come to light. Or Richard's secret meeting with his real estate developer about expropriation of Quilambala lands that would be highly profitable, as long as certain people remain silent. Keisha had always had a photographic memory for details, a talent she had developed in childhood as a survival mechanism in unstable foster homes, where remembering every unwritten rule and every mood swing of the adults meant the difference between a quiet night and an explosion of violence. Now, as she walked back to the mansion carrying Isabella in her arms after another day at the park, Keisha made a decision that would change the course of their lives forever. That night, after the family had retired, she opened his personal laptop and began meticulously typing everything she had observed over the past 2 years. Names, dates, conversations, documents glimpsed. Every little piece of information her mind had filed away. 3 hours later, she had 42 pages of detailed observations about the Whitmore family's questionable activities. The phone rang at 2 in the morning. Helena, her venomous voice disguised as senile frailty. Keisha dear, I hope you understand that after the incident, it will be best for everyone if you look for another job. Of course, we will provide excellent references. I understand perfectly, Mrs. Whitmore, Keisha replied, his calm voice contrasting with the smile that was beginning to form on her lips. But I think before I leave, it would be interesting to talk about some things I've noticed during my time here. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. When Helena finally spoke, the mask of the frail little old lady had completely disappeared. I don't know what you're talking about, and I suggest you be very careful with unfounded accusations. Oh, don't worry, Keisha replied softly. They're not accusations. They're just observations. Like those conversations about accounts in the Cayman Islands. Or Dr. Morrison's documents about altered medical reports. Or that interesting meeting about Quilambala lands that I happened to see. The silence that followed was so deep that Keisha could hear Helena's heavy breathing through the phone. You have no proof, Helena finally hissed, her voice now distilling all the venom she had always hidden behind the mask of a respectable matriarch. Maybe not, Keisha admitted, still smiling. But you know what's interesting about nannies, Mrs. Whitmore? We're always taking pictures of the children. And sometimes, by chance, other things appear in the background of those photos. Interesting documents, accidentally recorded conversations, people in meetings that supposedly never happened. Each new humiliation they tried to impose only strengthened something inside Keisha that those privileged people couldn't see, a determination forged by years of injustice that had finally found the perfect target. What that arrogant family didn't know was that each act of contempt was sealing his own fate. Because those who survive being underestimated their entire lives learn exactly how to use that invisibility as the most powerful weapon there is. Helena's response was quicker and more brutal than Keisha had anticipated. The next morning, 2 private detectives were waiting at the door of his small apartment with a subpoena, charges of extortion, blackmail, and invasion of privacy. Ms. Johnson, said the taller one, a man in an expensive suit who clearly did not belong in that neighborhood. The Whitmore family alleges that you are attempting to extort money from his family using false and defamatory information. Keisha read the document with her stomach in knots. He had hired one of the most powerful law firms in town, the same one that represented politicians and tycoons when they needed to resolve inconvenient problems. For the rest of the week, her life became a calculated hell. His name appeared on an informal blacklist circulating among wealthy families in the area, warning of an unstable and potentially dangerous employee. 3 job interviews were cancelled at the last minute. His landlord received an anonymous call questioning his moral suitability as a tenant. But the most painful blow came when Isabella, the girl whose life she had saved, passed her on the street pretending not to know her. The teenager's eyes were red, as if she had been crying, but when Keisha waved, Isabella turned her face away and crossed to the other side of the sidewalk. "He even managed to turn the girl against you," Keisha muttered to herself, watching Isabella disappear into the crowd. What kind of poison do these people distill in their own families? It was on that Tuesday night, while reviewing her notes on the Whitmores for the 100th time, that the phone rang. The number was unknown. Keisha Johnson? The male voice was professional, but there was something urgent about it. "My name is Marcus Wellington, investigative journalist for the Herald Tribune. I received an anonymous tip about irregularities involving the Whitmore family, and his name was mentioned." Keisha hesitated. After a week of being hounded, any unknown call sounded like a trap. "How can I be sure that you are, in fact, the person you claim to be?" "Check the newspaper's website. I have a 20-year career investigating corporate and government corruption. I won the Pulitzer Prize in 2018 for a series on organ trafficking in private hospitals." Keisha quickly typed on her laptop. Marcus Wellington really did exist, and his resume was impressive. Dozens of reports that had brought down corrupt executives, dishonest politicians, and million-dollar schemes. "Why are you interested in the Whitmores?" she asked, still cautious. "Because I've received information that they're involved in something much bigger than extortion or money laundering. Someone told me that you witnessed an attempted murder and have documentation of the family's criminal activities." Over the next 2 hours, Keisha told Marcus the whole story, from the conversation she overheard about changes to the will to Isabella's poisoning, to her observations about offshore accounts and embezzlement schemes. Marcus took meticulous notes, occasionally pausing to ask specific questions that demonstrated a deep knowledge of financial investigation and corporate crime. "Keisha," he finally said, "what you've discovered may be just the tip of the iceberg. The Whitmore Corporation has been under secret investigation by the FBI for 6 months on suspicion of money laundering and corruption in government contracts. Your information could be the missing key." "But he has powerful lawyers, political influence, endless money," Keisha protested. "How can an unemployed nanny take them on?" "The same way David took on Goliath," Marcus smiled on the other end of the line. "With the right weapon at the right time. And you, may have exactly the weapon we need." In the days that followed, Marcus proved to be the ally Keisha never imagined she would have. Not only did he validate all of her observations, but he also uncovered even more sinister connections. The Whitmore Corporation had been rigging public bids for years, directing million-dollar contracts to shell companies owned by the family itself. "Those conversations about Quilombo lands you overheard? He's planning the biggest land grab of the decade. 12,000 hectares of ancestral territory will be purchased for a pittance and turned into luxury condominiums." Marcus also revealed something that made Keisha tremble with rage. Helena Whitmore didn't try to poison Isabella over inheritance issues. It was because the little girl had found out about the organs. For 2 intense weeks, Keisha worked secretly with Marcus, providing details that only someone who had lived inside the house could know. Meeting schedules, names mentioned in conversations, documents photographed discreetly during his years of invisibility. Marcus, in turn, used his contacts at the FBI to cross-reference Keisha's information with evidence that federal agents were already collecting. Every little detail she had observed fit perfectly into a gigantic puzzle of corruption and crimes against human life. "He was underestimated by them for 2 whole years," Keisha said during one of her secret meetings with Marcus at a discreet cafe in the city center. "They treated him like furniture, talking about criminal business in front of him as if he were deaf and dumb." "And that was the biggest mistake they ever made," Marcus replied, typing on his laptop. "Because now we have detailed documentation of 2 years of criminal activity, seen through the eyes of a witness with photographic memory and impeccable moral integrity." Meanwhile, the Whitmore family continued to intensify their campaign of destruction against Keisha. Patricia spread rumors in the community about erratic and potentially violent behavior regarding her. Richard used his influence to have her investigated by the Internal Revenue Service. Helena went so far as to hire a private investigator to comb through every aspect of her past life. "They're desperate," Marcus observed. "People with a clear conscience don't act like this." Every move they make against him confirms that her observations are true and devastating. "About why Grandma tried to kill me." The little girl's voice trembled with fear and regret. "You were right about everything. And it's much worse than we imagined." As she prepared for the meeting that could definitively expose the extent of the Whitmores' crimes, Keisha reflected on how her apparent defeat had turned into the greatest opportunity of her life. Years of forced invisibility had turned her into the most dangerous person those white-collar criminals could imagine. Someone who had seen everything, heard everything, and finally had the power to use that knowledge to destroy the empire of lies they had built on the suffering of innocent people. The meeting with Isabella took place in a location Keisha would never have expected, the Whitmore mansion itself. The little girl had called again, this time with specific instructions. "Come at midnight. Through the back gate. I have the evidence that will destroy him forever." When Keisha arrived, Isabella was waiting for her in the garden, carrying a heavy backpack and with red eyes from crying so much. "I stole everything," the teenager said without preamble. "Computers, flash drives, documents, recordings. 2 years of material that my father and grandmother kept in the secret safe." "Isabella, what did you find out?" Keisha asked, hugging the little girl who was visibly shaking. "That he didn't try to kill me because of the will," Isabella sobbed. "It was because I saw the fake medical records in Grandma's office. Patients who died waiting for organs while others bought compatibility for $200,000 each." Over the next 3 hours, sitting on the garden bench where Isabella had played as a child, the little girl revealed the true extent of her family's crimes. It wasn't just organ trafficking, it was an empire built on death and human suffering that had been operating for over a decade. "I have recordings of meetings where my father discusses how to speed up the deaths of critically ill patients to release organs more quickly," Isabella said, showing a small digital recorder. "And documents proving that he embezzled over $50 million in donations to needy children's hospitals." Marcus Wellington arrived at 3 in the morning, accompanied by 2 federal agents whom Isabella had contacted through his phone. The journalist quickly examined the material, while the agents verified the authenticity of the documents. "My God," Marcus muttered, leafing through falsified medical records. "This isn't just organized crime. It's systematic genocide against vulnerable populations." Agent Rodriguez, a veteran of financial crimes, shook his head as he analyzed bank statements. Accounts in tax havens, shell companies, bribery of public officials. "We have enough material here for lawsuits that will last for decades." Isabella then revealed the most shocking information. "They know you're investigating. My father received a call yesterday warning him that they have 48 hours to destroy all the evidence and flee the country." "How do you know that?" Keisha asked. "Because I recorded the conversation," Isabella smiled for the first time that night, showing another device. "And I also photographed the fake passports that arrived this morning." It was the moment Keisha had been waiting for weeks. All the humiliation, all the persecution, all the attempts to destroy his credibility had come to an end. Now it was his turn to act. "Marcus, can you publish the story tomorrow morning?" she asked, his eyes shining with a determination the federal agents had never seen in a victim. "I can do better than that," Marcus smiled. "I can broadcast it live on television at 6 in the morning, just when Richard Whitmore always watches the news while eating his breakfast." At 5:45 a.m., while the Whitmore family was still sleeping in their Egyptian cotton sheets, dozens of federal agents surrounded the mansion with arrest and search warrants. Richard Whitmore was awakened by knocks on his bedroom door, already wearing handcuffs before he even fully understood what was happening. "This is absurd. You have no evidence of anything." "Mr. Whitmore," Agent Rodriguez said calmly, "you are under arrest for conspiracy, human organ trafficking, money laundering, corruption of public officials, and attempted murder. You have the right to remain silent." Patricia Whitmore fainted when she saw her husband being led away in handcuffs through the halls of his own mansion, while other agents carried away computers, files, and works of art purchased with dirty money. Helena Whitmore, the poisonous matriarch who had orchestrated decades of crime, was found trying to burn documents in his bedroom fireplace. At 80 years old, She was handcuffed while screaming about people who don't know their place in society. Miss Helena Whitmore is under arrest for the same crimes, in addition to attempted murder of her own granddaughter, announced a federal agent, completely ignoring the elderly woman's hysterical protests. Meanwhile, at the television station headquarters, Marcus Wellington was broadcasting live the biggest investigative report of her career. Exclusive, billionaire family operated international organ trafficking scheme for 15 years, causing the deaths of hundreds of needy patients. Live footage of the arrest alternated with devastating audio recordings, scanned documents, and testimonials from Keisha and Isabella. The entire country stopped to watch the downfall of one of the most respected families in American high society. At the Whitmore Corporation office, employees watched in horror as the company's stock plummeted in real time. In 2 hours, they lost 80% of their market value. Keisha watched it all from the television studio, sitting next to Marcus as he conducted interviews with white-collar crime experts. For the first time in her adult life, she wasn't being treated as invisible. She was recognized as the hero who had saved hundreds of lives. How does it feel to see the family that tried to destroy her life being arrested live on national television? Marcus asked during a commercial break. "I don't take pleasure in anyone's suffering," Keisha replied with a dignity that has always been his. "But I feel a deep satisfaction knowing that justice will finally be served for all the people who died because compatible organs were sold to the highest bidder." Isabella, who had spent the early hours of the morning giving a statement to federal investigators, called Keisha, crying with relief. "Thank you for saving me. And thank you for giving me the courage to do the right thing." "You always knew how to do the right thing," Keisha replied. "You just needed to find the strength to fight those who should have protected you." As the last images of the police operation played on television, Richard Whitmore being led to the police car, Helena shouting incoherent accusations, Patricia being comforted by shocked neighbors, one question remained unanswered. Was it possible that a simple nanny had really brought down a 15-year criminal empire just by observing and remembering? The answer was about to transform not only Keisha's life, but the entire concept of social justice in the United States. 6 months after what the press dubbed the Whitmore scandal, Keisha Johnson sat in the front row of the Harvard University auditorium, receiving the National Civil Courage Award from a U.S. Attorney General himself. Her bravery saved not just one life, but hundreds of others that would have been lost to organ trafficking, the official declared as the audience rose to prolonged applause. Keisha Johnson has proven that heroism knows no social class, race, or hierarchical position. The transformation in his life had been complete. 3 publishers were vying for the rights to her autobiography. 5 universities offered full scholarships for any course she desired, and the FBI had hired her as a special consultant on white-collar crime, recognizing her unique ability to observe and memorize details that others overlooked. But the most satisfying moment came when she heard about the convictions. Richard Whitmore received 45 years in prison for organ trafficking and conspiracy. Helena Whitmore, even at 80 years of age, was sentenced to 25 years, enough time for her to die in prison paying for the crimes he had committed. Patricia Whitmore, who had escaped criminal charges due to lack of direct evidence, lost everything in another way. Abandoned by her high society friends, bankrupt after the victims' lawsuits, she now worked as a receptionist at a veterinary clinic, experiencing for the first time in her life the social invisibility she had always imposed on others. Isabella, now 18, visited Keisha monthly. The little girl had become an activist for domestic workers' rights and regularly testified before Congress about the importance of protecting whistleblowers from all walks of life. "You taught me that courage isn't about not being afraid," Isabella said during one of her visits. "It's about doing the right thing even when everyone is against you." The impact of Keisha's story echoed far beyond the courts. The Johnson Protocol was implemented in hospitals across the country, creating safe channels for employees at all levels to report wrongdoing without fear of retaliation. His story inspired dozens of other invisible workers to expose corruption in their workplaces. Marcus Wellington won his second Pulitzer Prize for the investigative series based on Keisha's information, but he always made a point of crediting her as the true hero of the story. The sweetest aspect of revenge, however, came unexpectedly. Keisha received a call from a Hollywood producer interested in buying the film rights to her story. The amount offered was more than she had earned in 2 decades as a nanny. But perhaps the greatest transformation was internal. Keisha had learned that his supposed invisibility was not a weakness, it was his superpower. Years of quiet observation had made him one of the most astute people in the country at identifying corruption and white-collar crime. Do you know what his biggest mistake was during all those years? She reflected during a lecture at a university. Thinking that being ignored meant he had no value. In fact, being behind the scenes gave her access to information that powerful people would never have allowed him to see if they considered him a threat. The family that tried to destroy her credibility ended up validating her importance in a way they could never have imagined. Richard Whitmore, in an interview from prison, admitted that the biggest mistake of his life was underestimating a simple nanny. She saw everything, heard everything, remembered everything, he said, defeated. And we treated her like she was furniture. It was our arrogance that destroyed us. Today, Keisha runs his own non-profit organization dedicated to protecting whistleblowers of corporate crime, especially those in vulnerable positions in the social hierarchy. His organizational motto perfectly sums up his journey: invisible does not mean harmless. The best revenge, Keisha learned, was not to destroy those who had harmed her, it was to build something greater than they could ever imagine. While the Whitmores rot in prison, she uses his experience to save lives and expose corruption on a national scale. If his story of courage and transformation has inspired him, subscribe to the channel for more stories that prove that true strength comes from those we least expect, and that sometimes those who seem to have the least power are exactly the ones who have the power to change everything.